Good morning, Mexico. I'm María Salazar. Welcome to ADN 40 News. Today is Saturday, August 31st. It's September, Agustín.
The month is over. That's right. I'm Agustín Barrios Gómez. We're here live from our studios in Mexico City. It's a gorgeous day in the big city. We've got a lot of news for you.
A lot of news. You know, we're getting, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity to give you the latest update on this hurricane that may be changing its route. I mean, we're following this very, very closely.
Right now, it still has in its sights Mar-a-Lago.
Well,
more
no,
or less?
no.
Or is it going north?
It may be going north.
So the European model has it actually tracking the
exactly.
the Atlantic
coast. Yeah, it may hit in some other part. I mean, of course, Florida will be affected. But anyway, hopefully we'll be able to give you an update on that.
Yeah, we got some great interviews. We're going to be talking about security and all of that. But we're going to begin the program with the unfortunate news that's coming out of Veracruz. It became the center of attention this week due to a bar attack that left 29 people dead. Unbelievable. Let's take a look.
On Tuesday night, a bar attack shook the city of Coatzacoalcos, Veracruz. Armed men stormed into the establishment and opened fire. Then they poured petrol and threw Molotov cocktails to burn the place. Then they closed the doors to flee. 2 foreign nationals are amongst the victims. They were Philippine Marines identified as Brian G. Varon and Nathaniel Allendon. According to the Executive Secretariat of the National Public Security System, Veracruz is the 3rd state with the largest number of missing people and clandestine graves, as well as the 6th one with most homicides. Between January to July, there were 835 homicides and 114 femicides, 200 kidnapping cases, 2,295 stolen vehicles, and 2,666 business thefts. The most violent municipalities are Jalapa, Minatitlan, and Coatzacoalcos, conflict territories which are disputed by the Jalisco Nueva Generación and the Zetas cartels. Tamaulipas is another violent state. A recent armed clash between authorities and criminals raised red flags. Men on board a truck with Texas plates opened fire against state agents who were patrolling near Nuevo Laredo's airport. The elements responded and ended killing 7 of the attackers who were disguised with military uniforms and that had large weapons. Also in that state, according to the Executive Secretariat of the National Public Security System, between January and July there were 394 homicides, 4 feminicides, 21 kidnapping cases, and 1,631 vehicle thefts. While the most violent municipalities are Mante, Rio Bravo, Nuevo Laredo, Vallehermoso, and Reynosa. ADN 40 News.
And also, in addition, there was another attack in the state of Michoacán with at least 9 dead in the last 24 hours. We're going to be talking about that with today's guest, Julio Sabines. He's our security expert here in ADN 40 News. Welcome to the show.
Thank
Julio,
you,
what is going on? I mean, there seems to be an increase of the level of violence, but also the intensity. I mean, this attack in the bar, this Caballo Blanco bar in Veracruz, it was 29 dead. This was, and the way they did it?
It's awful. We shouldn't put all crimes in the same basket. We have to differentiate between what's happening in Veracruz, what's happening in Michoacán. They are not strictly the same phenomenon, but in the case of Michoacán, well, I just point out that it's blunt terrorism and
Michoacán or in Veracruz?
Veracruz.
Veracruz.
Yeah, Veracruz.
I mean, the fact. I mean, the details of how they did this. They came into the bar. They threw gasoline.
Sprayed the place with gasoline.
They shoot everybody down.
We just saw it happen something very similar a few months ago. Probably the perpetrators are the same actors, and it should be a reaction to pressure.
What's going on with I mean, is there a divide between the state government and the federal government?
No. The division between the local government and its attorney, the local fiscalia, it's just been terrible, and this has broken the relation and the efforts to prosecute.
See, I mean, you know, we also have Tamaulipas, and we saw some information on Tamaulipas right now. And the governor of Tamaulipas issued a letter to President Andrés Manuel López Obrador saying, you know, we don't have enough National Guard. And he's kind of insinuating that there's also a political, there's, you know, politics involved. In the same way that you have this division in the state of Veracruz, where you have these fights between the state government and the Attorney General's office, politics. Michoacán, I have to think that maybe also politics was involved. How concerned should we be that any security strategy is going to be sabotaged just because of these infighting among the actors who have the responsibility over
Is
this?
politics to blame?
I don't believe so. I think the confirmation of the National Guard is a process it's going to be strengthening during time, and we're not yet in the amount of elements that people in the National Guard we should have. I saw in the case of Tamaulipas that there was politics between Gobernación and the governor,
Right.
Because of the talks with
One of the armed
organized crime?
groups, it's organized crime,
Or the Guardias Blancas, no?
Yeah.
The self-defense forces.
Yes,
Right.
Yeah.
self-defense. So we saw in that case very openly the governor asking the president for, but crime itself is something that groups are taking different places that we saw before. The leaderships have shifted. So I would say that there's a very big reorganization in many of the crime structures, syndicates. So this is to probably blame. My bet is that with time we will see better
Results.
results in the way the National Guard is eventually conforming, and the Attorney General, Dr. Alejandro Gertz, also is doing a very strong effort in having a bigger presence of the Fiscalía General de la República.
Right, and of course, Dr. Gertz was actually Minister of Public Security under
Here in
Fox,
Mexico, yeah.
here in Mexico City under Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas.
Right.
Thank you very much, Julio, for being with us.
Thank
We're
you.
going to have you
Thank
in
you.
Spanish, so if
We'll
you
see
want
in
to
about
give
40
follow-up
minutes.
with that.
Thank you.
Continue
That's right.
talking about this. Meanwhile, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador spoke about the lack of medicines needed for chemotherapy treatments for children who have cancer. He said that there is enough resources to purchase these drugs outside of the country. This and much more is part of AMLO's Week. Let's watch.
President Andrés Manuel López Obrador started the week with a private meeting with U.S. Ambassador to Mexico, Christopher Landau. The president told Landau that the government is following the El Paso case very closely. In fact, Mexican officials have stated that a deterrent punishment must be imposed against the offender. At the ceremony marking the beginning of another school year, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador stressed that his administration's priority is education. The president also stated that they're investing in providing scholarships for several students.
Se trata de una inversión, que no de un gasto, del orden de 60,000 millones de pesos para impulsar la educación.
Mexico's president also announced a deal to end a standoff with several natural gas pipeline operators over contract prices, thus allowing them to avoid international arbitration and begin increasing gas deliveries across the country. Even though the terms of the deal weren't immediately made public, the president highlighted that the agreement ensures that the Federal Electricity Commission, CFE, would pay less, thus saving around $4.5 billion.
Tenemos que agradecer el día de hoy la voluntad de los empresarios para llegar a un acuerdo mediante el diálogo, poniendo por delante el interés nacional y considerando también el interés de las empresas.
AMLO also urged the members of his party, Morena, to uphold the interest upon which the party was built.
Si el partido que ayudé a fundar, Morena, se echara a perder, no solo renunciaría a él, sino me gustaría que le cambiaran de nombre, que ya no usaran ese nombre, porque ese nombre nos dio la oportunidad de llevar a cabo la cuarta transformación de la vida pública del país.
This Sunday, September 1st, the president will hold accountability for his first year in office at the National Palace. ADN 40.
And this was actually one of the biggest news this week because it kind of changed things, and we need to understand exactly what happened, which is why we have with us Miriam Gernstein. She is an expert on energy matters. Miriam, so we saw what seems to be a sea change with respect to one, the ducts that are coming into to Yucatan, right? For natural gas,
right.
And the other is of course these contracts. Talk to us about what really happened this week.
Well, it was. I think it was a change of paradigm. I was very worried after the cancellation of the contracts of the airport. I was expecting to see a lot of tension surrounding these natural gas pipelines. Manuel Bartlett reviewed these contracts as natural gas pipeline contracts, and he said that they were very unfair. He used the word leolino, which is which in Spanish, which in English means
right?
You take the lion's share of the profits as a natural gas pipeline company. And natural gas pipelines in Mexico are relatively expensive because of the acquisition of rights of way and the risk of social upheaval when you're constructing.
Right.
So companies have to compensate for those risks. But if you measure the risks versus the benefits, Mexico is a really good candidate for transporting natural gas.
Right, the cheapest in the world it was coming from Texas.
Because in the south of Texas, especially in the Permian Basin, you have a lot of cheap natural gas.
Right.
So extracting domestic natural gas, putting it into a pipeline would be a very costly affair. Also, importing it, be it from Peru or from Australia and from Trinidad and Tobago, would require additional infrastructure
LNG
for
plants.
LNG plants for the liquefaction and regasification of the gas. So these are good deals.
Right.
So
does that mean it's a go? Are they going to move forward on that?
Yes.
Okay.
They're going to move forward. The one I'm the happiest about is the Texas Tuxpan natural gas pipeline, which is a very revolutionary project because it doesn't go through the mainland. It goes beneath the sea, and then it emerges in Veracruz.
And you avoid all the problems of having to negotiate with the community.
Exactly. That's why it was built that way. It's a transoceanic pipeline precisely because they wanted to avoid social conflicts and also organized crime.
Of course.
Of course. So just rapidly, this image of Carlos Slim, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, on the same, this image of them literally holding hands, and Slim talking about being very positive about investing in Mexico. This is good. I mean, it sends a good message.
I think it is good. Also, it is good because it prevents us from having an energy crisis. The fact that Slim and the president shook hands, well, it's good. But what I think is great is that we're not going to run out of natural gas, which is absolutely necessary for the industry and for the public utility service. I mean, just imagine having to go through program outages. 6 to 7, you cannot use anything electric because we have to ration electricity. That would have been disastrous for the competitivity of the country and also for our quality of life. So yes, this is a very good sign that that the government is open to making sense.
Right, and understanding the situation. Miriam Gernstein, thank you very much for being with us on the program.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you. And we're going to see you again in the Spanish version of this program. And now let's review what happened during this week at the global markets. Let's watch.
Trading activity this month was marked by trade tensions, mixed signals about the economy, and prospects of stimulus ahead. Much of the market's path hinges on whether the U.S. and China can come to a truce before the world economy develops into a prolonged downturn. In fact, September could be challenging since the major U.S. index has historically delivered its poorest returns of the year in the month. In the U.S., during August, the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq dropped 0.2 and 0.5%, while the Dow Jones dropped 0.3%. The yield on the 10-year Treasury note fell 57 basis points, reaching 1.5%. Elsewhere, European and Asian markets closed mixed. The Stock 600 rose 0.3%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng and Shanghai Composite fell 4.4% and 0.6% respectively. In Japan, the stock market lost 1.8%. The Mexican benchmark rose 6.6% and the Mexican peso ended the week at 20.07, depreciating 3.9%. Next week, analysts in the U.S. will be focused on non-farm payrolls in Jay Powell's speech in Zurich. In Mexico, market participants will closely follow remittances and investment figures. ADN 40 News.
And to talk about all this, we've got our in-house financial analyst, Diana Cerros, whose birthday it is this morning.
Oh, let's do the ADN 40 News. Wait.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Diana.
How old are
Thank
you?
you.
10? I mean, gosh.
Almost.
Exactly.
21.
Happy birthday. Happy
Exactly.
birthday.
Yeah, let's go with that. So what have you got for us
Birthday.
today, Diana?
Thank you so much for having me. Well, I want to show you a graph that shows how the Mexican peso has depreciated, and we have talked about, the causes of this depreciation through this month, right?
Okay. So do we have a
Mexican
graph
peso,
that you can show us?
I don't know. I'm not sure. But anyways, the Mexican peso started the month at 19.2.
Okay.
So 1920. And then it went to 20 pesos per dollar.
Okay.
That's around 4%.
Okay, so Miriam was just telling us that there's some economic common sense that's coming into the discourse.
Yes.
Why would the peso devalue? Why are we seeing this graph of
This
devaluation?
has to do a lot with how the U.S. dollar has behaved. Over the course of this month, and we have had bad news in terms of the trade war, and then we had good news again, but. Still, this bad news about Argentina, about the trade war, and, about how uncertainty in Mexico is affecting,
But the Mexican bolsa went up 6%?
Through in August, that's right, due to good news again. And what's interesting is how is that going to, what's going to happen in the future with the Mexican peso? And, it's interesting because we had the inflation report this week, and Banxico cut the estimates of inflation, and that's due to non-core inflation. But still, they cut the projections, and so what is going to happen? Is Banxico going to cut rates faster than the U.S. or the Federal Reserve? And if so, then if the spread is not does not remain constant, then we will have a depreciation.
So the markets are starting to discount the idea that Banxico might actually lower rates more quickly than they expected.
By the end of 2020, most analysts in the markets are discounting that Banxico will cut around 150 basis points.
Wow.
So
Now, how does that, the fact that
Yeah.
Banxico also came out with their future growth,
Yes.
0.5, I think, between, what was it, 0.5 and
no,
the spread
they
was...
cut the projections for growth from 1.8 and 1.2, and now they are at 0.2 and 0.7. So we're expecting to grow around 0.5 maybe. So by the end of 2019, and that's another reason for Banxico to cut rates this year. So most analysts by the end of 2019 are expecting another cut, and some are saying that Banxico might cut twice. I'm not sure about two cuts for me. I'm not that sure, but it could happen. I'm not discerning that.
No, Diana, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks
and
for
happy
having me.
birthday.
Yes, happy
Send her a
birthday,
happy
Diana
birthday
Cerros.
tweet.
That's right. And we are, of course, on Twitter. You can find us there at ADN40. We're going to go to a commercial break. We'll be right back after these messages. Don't go away.
Go away. Welcome back to ADN 40 News. Hurricane Dorian continues to strengthen as it moves towards the Bahamas and the East Coast, threatening the Carolinas, where it could make a landfall next week. It is already a Category 4 storm with maximum sustained winds of 233 kilometers per hour. There had been a lot of concerns this week at least up in a couple hours ago, that it would be heading towards Florida, as you can see in these images.
This is in real time?
This is in
right
real
now
time.
live.
And it is a Category 4. It's a very dangerous storm. It appears, can you see Florida, Daytona Beach, Jacksonville? It appears, as of right now, that it's not going to be a direct hit to Florida. So we're going to be watching this very dangerous hurricane very closely.
Yeah, it seems that it's going to be tracking up the Atlantic coast. Meanwhile, Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro has reacted furiously to foreign criticism of his handling of the Amazon fires. This and more is part of our Global Weekly Summary. Let's take a look.
The firefighters battling the devastating blazes in the Amazon rainforest are about to get some backup. This after the G7 leaders meeting in France agreed to a $20 million emergency aid package to help fight those fires. The record number of fires ravaging the rainforest has sparked international concern because of the Amazon's importance to the global environment. The aid package comes as tensions flare between Macron and Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro. Macron last week accused the conservative Bolsonaro of lying about his environmental commitments. Bolsonaro, who wants to open the Amazon to more farming and mining, on Sunday mocked Macron's wife on Facebook. And on Monday, he questioned Macron's intentions, saying on Twitter any plan should not treat the Amazon like a colony or a no man's land. So far, nearly 80,000 fires have been recorded in Brazil this year through the weekend. Many of those fires are thought to have been started deliberately. Some 44,000 troops are stationed in the northern Amazon region to help. Officials say the G7 plan would be rolled out in 2 stages. The first stage involves sending firefighters and water bombers. The second involves protecting the forests and their biodiversity, then reforesting the region.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson will suspend Parliament just weeks before the UK is due to leave the European Union. In a move that's triggered outrage and sent the pound sharply down. What Johnson's done is call a Queen's speech for October the 14th.
My Lords, pray be seated.
That's a formal procedure used by the government to lay out its legislative agenda for the year ahead. And what it involves is effectively shutting Parliament from mid-September for about a month. The Queen has approved the request. It's not unusual per se for a Prime Minister to call a Queen's speech, except for the fact that the UK is weeks away from the October 31st deadline, when Johnson says he will take Britain out of the European Union without a divorce deal if necessary. Business groups fear that will cause widespread economic disruption. His opponents say Johnson is trying to undemocratically block them from preventing that happening. But he claims it's not about Brexit. The pound tumbled to its lowest level in nearly a week on the news, while Brexit-sensitive stocks such as airlines and house builders took a hammering.
A former commander of Colombia's FARC rebel group says the group is being reformed 3 years after disbanding. Known by the pseudonym Ivan Marquez, he says the FARC is returning because the Colombian peace deal has failed. The announcement comes amid severe challenges for the complex accord, including the murder of hundreds of former rebels and human rights activists. Marquez was a key negotiator of the peace agreement signed in 2016, but in the video announcement released on Thursday, he calls the agreement a trick and a betrayal that has, quote, obliged us to return to the mountains.
And to talk about the future of the peace process in Colombia, joining us today is Mexico's former ambassador in Cuba, very well-known political analyst, Ricardo Pascoe. Welcome to the show, Ricardo.
Thank you very much.
Are we surprised that this is happening?
You know, there are 2 hot spots in the world that have concerning similarities. Mm-hmm. I would say Syria and the Venezuela and Colombia conundrum. Mm-hmm. You have to see the state actors, and you have to see all the surrogate actors that are in the region. So it's just a very complex process that's going on.
But there was a lot of hope that this may be a model for other countries, or at least some lessons could be learned as to how to negotiate with guerrilla groups, armed groups. Colombia has experience even negotiating with narcotics, drug trafficking organizations. I mean, so what we saw this week, Do you think it's the end of the peace process? I mean, I heard President Duque say, this is just a small group, and they already issued arrest warrants, and I guess there was an attack to one of their bases, and they killed 9. I think one of them, and that was in that picture, was actually killed during these attacks. I mean, I'm just trying. What is your sense? I mean,
Are we going to see a return to the violence?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we are. Okay. But I think we are because it's not a problem of Colombia.
Yeah.
If you isolate Colombia with its peace process, it could be an interesting model. You have guerrilla movement, the drug, anti-state movements, but
self-defense forces.
Self-defense forces. But the problem is that you have Venezuela next door, and Venezuela has become the depository of world conflict, just like Syria. So the problem is you have, the Russians are interested in Venezuela. The Cubans are very, very involved in the guerrilla movements.
Mm-hmm. And of course the United States.
And then of course the U.S. is pressuring Mr. Maduro to honorably leave. Mm-hmm. And so when there's pressures from one side, there are responses on the other side. My feeling is that this whole response of the FARC is negotiated with Maduro, mm-hmm. who is very close to the FARC. Mm-hmm. He actually declared that Marquez, the leader of the FARC dissidents, are freedom fighters. So the fact is that they've become, this dissident group of the FARC has become a surrogate expression of the battle over Venezuela, Colombia, and just who's going to be leading in that area. The ELN as well, but it's a surrogate force for the Cubans, who are also acting in the region. When I was ambassador in Cuba, I mentioned this on other occasions, I had the chance to see the negotiations in Havana, and it was very clear to me that the ELN not only was interested in a peace agreement with the Colombian government in those years, but also the Cuban government was very interested in brokering a peace process. Now they're not. And that's because now the whole chess game has changed completely, and Cuba's defending its own interests in the region, as is Maduro and the U.S., and confronted with the Colombians now, so that it's become so complicated that it's impossible to understand Colombia without understanding the problem in Venezuela.
Clearly, there's probably also the issue of trafficking, cocaine trafficking, that these organizations were involved in the past before the peace process. So I have to wonder whether some of these groups also wanted to make this split to go back to the business. I don't know if that's going to be part of the problem.
Well, it probably is part of the problem, Ana Maria, but I wouldn't dare say that it's the central issue.
Yeah,
I don't feel that it is.
I agree with you.
I mean, I think that it continues to be essentially a whole political dispute about who's going to run the region,
so when you were
the
ambassador,
future of Venezuela,
right? Exactly.
When you were ambassador in Cuba, they were just rampant. They were just starting to have an input in Venezuela. The Cubans seem to have basically taken over in Venezuela and via this puppet regime now, because they're the political actors. They're the ones who are organizing the killing, the killing of dissidents and all of that. What is going to happen? I mean, is Venezuela going to become some sort of a colony of a puppet regime of Cuba? And what is their interest with Colombia? Is it just to destabilize in order to destabilize because that benefits them, because if you have instability on both sides, then they can stay in power? Is that the idea? I don't get it.
I think that the principal interest of the Cubans, for example, is to maintain the Maduro regime and to maintain the status quo in Venezuela. Right. I don't think that their main interest is Colombia. The problem is that Colombia has become such an important actor in the whole region that now they're vying with these surrogate forces. The surrogate forces are the dissident FARC, the ELN, who are fighting on both sides of the border between both countries and responding, I would say, to different interests. I think that the ELN is responding to Cuba's interests in Venezuela, and the FARC now I suspect, this is my speculation, have actually been promoted by Maduro, in fact, so that Maduro can have a force to even offset maybe the pressures that he feels from the Cubans. I mean, I think there are a lot of different groups with their surrogate forces. And this is kind of the Syrian example for me, is where you have everybody has surrogate forces on the ground fighting each other, defending different political and economic interests. And of course, one of them is the narcotráfico, without a doubt. But it's also very political.
That's a fascinating example that you use Syria, because also, as in Syria, the migration issue from Venezuela is destabilizing parts
the whole region.
The whole region.
The whole
in the
region,
same way
of
that
course.
Syrian migration. I mean, that's a very interesting comparison.
You have millions of Venezuelans now migrating around the world. Someone said to me when I made this comparison recently, they said, "Oh, that's ridiculous. Look at, Syria is much more serious in terms of migration." No, in fact, that's not the case.
The numbers are probably higher for Venezuela simply because it's a bigger country.
It could very well be that there are more Venezuelans migrating from their country than Syrians from theirs. So, it's a very...
Yeah, there are the big differences, of course, that you have much more land in South America for them to go to, all these different countries. They're fairly large countries. Brazil is massive. Colombia is relatively big, and all these different things.
But they're not letting them in. I mean, it has
and
created
Spanish,
a conflict.
of course.
And they speak Spanish. I mean, culturally, they're very similar. But these countries have started to control migration. I mean, the latest was, I think, Ecuador was now asking for Venezuelans. They had to have visas. They had to have a passport.
Of course. I mean, it's become a whole complicated issue. I mean, we see it here in Mexico, of course. I mean, people don't really like these sort of forced migration waves of people coming into the country.
Right.
The polls are very clear about this. It's not, everybody isn't just super generous about this thing. So
let me ask you a question, and before we finish, is there any role for the Mexican government in this latest decision by the FARC, and the fact that the Colombian government is going to have a frontal attack? I mean, like I said, they're just in the last 24 hours they've killed already representatives of the FARC. Does the Mexican diplomats have a role?
Should we be doing something different?
Be making a statement or not?
I feel that Mexico has been very cagey about its position on this thing. Like, they don't really want to say where their heart really rests in this whole issue. And of course, what that does is it debilitates your participating in any sense at all. I mean, Uruguay, that's been much more involved, was sort of closer to Mexico and looking for a kind of negotiation with the Maduro regime. But now Uruguay has become much more vociferous that the Maduro regime is wrong and has to rectify. Mexico has been very ambiguous and very cagey, as I say. So my feeling is that disqualifies us from being a very serious actor. So,
which may not be bad. I mean,
probably there's nothing to be done. Actually, at this point, if you want to get involved,
well, it's certainly unethical. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to really buy into realpolitik, it probably obeys the fact that they within the ruling party in Mexico, they have their own internal divisions.
They have divisions about that,
and so they'd rather not complicate it by saying something clear with respect to an immoral regime.
I mean, exactly. I agree with you. I think that
which is kind of sad. But anyway.
No, but I mean, you use your foreign policy in benefit of your country. And if it helps Mexico, you make a statement. If it doesn't, then, there's no reason to get involved in other people's...
You basically remain silent.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be
We're going to have the opportunity to see you in about 40 minutes to continue this conversation in our Spanish version of this program. So continuaremos.
Ambassador Ricardo Pasco, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, both of you.
That's very interesting.
So it's time to go to another commercial break, but please stay tuned. We'll be right back after these messages.
welcome back to ADN 40 News. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now we're going to go to the United States. This week, Donald Trump suggested hosting the next G7 summit at his property in Florida. He will also change citizenship rules for children of military personnel and diplomatic families born abroad. Also, he is making sick children who have been who are in the hospital right now. Well, basically, they're ordering them to leave the country if they don't have the right papers. Anyway, this and much more is part of Trump's Week. Let's watch.
Trump's week began in Biarritz, France during the G7 summit. At the end of the event, he suggested celebrating the next international event in his Florida National Golf Club in Dorian, an approach which drew immediate criticism that he seeks to profit from his presidency.
I'm not going to make any money. In my opinion, I'm not going to make any money. I don't want to make money. I don't care about making money. If I want to make money, I wouldn't worry about 3 billion to 5 billion, because that's what, I mean, at some point I'm going to detail that and we'll show. But I think it's just a great place to be. I think having it in Miami is fantastic.
As for his presidential rivals for the 2020 race, the number of Democrats seeking the nation's top position were reduced to 10, although Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren are still the favorites in their party. And to show that he is truly following throughout his campaign promises, Trump released a video about progress on building a wall. In his tweet, he also attached the message: the wall going up very fast despite total obstruction by Democrats in Congress and elsewhere. Meanwhile, the immigration iron fist plan also tighten up for the children of military personnel or diplomats born abroad. They won't get their U.S. citizenship automatically, as parents will now have to fill a form so their kids may get it before they turn 18. Finally, Trump canceled his trip to Poland due to the threat from Hurricane Dorian. From August 31st to September 2nd, he planned to attend the observance about the 80th anniversary of the Nazi invasion, which led to World War II.
Very important for me to be here. The storm looks like it could be a very, very big one indeed. And Mike will be going. I've just spoken to President Duda of Poland and expressed him my warmest wishes and the wishes of the American people. Our highest priority is the safety and security of the people in the path of the hurricane, and I will be rescheduling my trip to Poland in the near future.
ADN 40 News.
And to talk about this, we've got with us Amy Glover. She's CEO from Speyside, Mexico. Amy, good morning.
Good morning.
Where to start?
Yeah, where to start?
Where to start?
Where do you want to start?
What would you like to talk about? I mean, boy.
I think it's been an amazing week for the world, and I think what we're seeing here is a real breakdown in kind of global leadership and kind of a consensus in terms of where we should be moving, both in terms of environment, free trade, democracy, questioning many things that I think many of us thought weren't up for debate.
One of the things that actually impacts our American community here in Mexico, of course, is this idea that they would no longer, that military and diplomatic personnel would no longer be considered to be on quote unquote U.S. soil for the benefits of their children if they are born, you know, while
abroad,
on a military
right,
or diplomatic mission. In fact, that would actually disqualify McCain as being a natural born citizen.
Well, there was a debate about that
right?
because the
of
Panama Canal was considered to be part of U.S. territory. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's just mean. I mean, why would he announce that?
Why would they do that?
I think it plays again to his base, which is, we always try to step around it, but it is very much based on a white nationalist view of the United States and who is more American.
Right.
And so this is basically Stephen Miller paying attention to it, because his base is doesn't even know that overseas the kids of diplomats and military personnel used to be considered having been born on U.S. soil.
Agreed. And it's really shocking how much power Stephen Miller has to set the agenda in the White House. I think he is the mastermind behind a lot of these policies, but I think it does call into question, and it'll be interesting to see how
recruitment continues after this, because the reason there are so many African Americans and Hispanics in the military is because it was seen as a great ladder to kind of serve your country, obtain an education, and
for migrants, because a lot of soldiers have green cards.
And that was a way, if you were willing to serve in the military for the United States of America, you were considered, you would be given U.S. citizenship. So to say that you're just the person who served and not the children, to me, is absolutely insane.
I have to ask you about something, because this also affects Mexico, and I'm sure Mexico is going to be watching this very closely. These new regs in regards to methane regulations.
Sure.
What is that about?
Yeah, I mean, this is part of this whole rollback of regulations, environmental regulations in the U.S. They just announced last week the EPA will be diminishing the methane regulations for the oil and gas sector. Well, in June 2016, U.S., Mexico, and Canada signed an agreement to reduce methane emissions in the sector. The question is, what will happen with those commitments?
Right.
Methane is extremely damaging to the environment with respect to climate change, greenhouse gases. So, you know, the oil and gas industry is not even in agreement with this. So once again, it's to your question, I was seeing who's behind this. Like, what's the motivation?
Yeah, nobody was
Does
paying
the base
attention
really
to
even
that.
care? Like, why should we damage the environment when really there's not even a political
It seems to be misanthropic, right? It's as much damage as you can do. What people have to understand, where is the methane coming from? So you've got fracking. Fracking actually busts up the underlying rock. And what ends up happening is that there is methane that seeps up, and you can actually see this on these cameras. Before, the EPA actually asked the companies that were doing the fracking to control this thing, because of course it's bad for life. But unfortunately, it seems that there is this misanthropic agenda where you need to do as much damage as possible. Very Jair Bolsonaro in that sense. Nobody was actually asking for it, so why are they doing it?
Exactly. And there's also another element. A lot of it is just maintenance on pipelines and whatnot, which behooves companies to have control over their resource, because you're losing the resource when you have these emissions. So it is bizarre. It's
Is there a Steve Miller for the environment? Just as Steve Miller wants to.
That's Trump.
Wants to hurt
Trump and some of his cronies who really see this as, hey, you know, business. It's a very ironic mix, because business should be able to do whatever it wants, and yet the president demands that companies operating in China come back to the homeland.
Before we go, we have to talk about this gossipy bit of news. His assistant, Donald Trump's assistant, was fired because she was saying kind of nasty things about Donald Trump's children in front of journalists at a dinner. I mean, that's kind of crazy. I think everybody in the White House is on a path to suicide. I mean, what's your
read on that?
I think it just goes to show how people can really lose their sense of, you know, when you're empowered very young. I think she was 28. And she was a gatekeeper to the President of the United States. You know, I'm sure her ego, just like her boss, was kind of overinflated and kind of thinking, hey, you know, I'm on the inside, I can make these decisions. He called her his beauty. I mean, obviously she was
cute,
eye candy. So, and apparently knew how to read his moods. Interestingly, too, when this is a pretty big, a real kind of, it's really a traitor to the president, and he didn't really get angry about it.
He felt sorry for her.
Yeah, kind of like, oh, poor thing.
So palace intrigue, more palace intrigue.
Yeah.
Amy, thank you very much for being with us.
See you in a couple minutes.
Yeah, we're going to have you in Espanol as well.